What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm also going to break down what's happening with the economic calendar approaching tomorrow, as we have Jerome Powell giving a speech and the FOMC meeting. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, not to mention an 8.1% APY on invested cash. The offer ends very soon, in about 2 weeks from now. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the market. So, as we hit the 608 area of resistance or very close to that range, SPY tends to reject. And as we hit around 602, we do tend to get bought back up. Now, today, what happened to SPY is we hit the 603 area. We did get bought back up to 605, only to come back down towards the end of the day. So I will say that this chart is showing some weakness, especially as we've been making lower highs right here. But whether or not we truly get a big rejection or we get a big bounce is going to depend a lot on what happens during FOMC. That's why I want to give you guys some more information about it involving like CPI and factors like that. Then I'll break down the charts for SPY, Tesla, the QQQ, and the others. So for the way the market was moving, we saw Nvidia in the red, AVGO was also in the red, and most stocks were pretty much more bearish, especially as Google started to cool off after hitting into 200 area. But there was Tesla that was very, very strong, up 3.64%, outperforming the market, and the rest of the charts were a little bit weaker. Now, whether or not we get some kind of bounce, like I said, depends on FOMC. So how is tomorrow going to go? Tomorrow is going to be Wednesday, December 18th, 2024. Just know that as far as the way the market's going to move, there's not really anything too significant that's coming out. The market's going to be very, very minor, at least for the first couple of hours, right? There's nothing crazy coming out for the first couple of hours. Things are going to be very, very quiet. So what I would say is as soon as we open, there might be a little bit of volatility, and then after that, the market's going to start to remain very choppy. That is typically what happens. There might be a lot of choppy sideways price action, very, very slow price action, low volume in the very beginning of the day. And then things get serious starting at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's when we have the Fed interest rate decision coming out. We're expecting a 25 basis point cut with the consensus and forecast saying the overall rate hitting 4.5%. The Fed's going to make that announcement first alongside their interest rate projections. This is going to tell us where they see interest rates 1 year out, 2 years out, 3 years out, and etc. That's going to be very, very important. So that's what we're going to be looking for, a lot of volatility at 2 p.m. If the Fed gives us some kind of cut, we might see a little pop in the markets. But then after that, whether the pop leads to a big pump or a big rug pull is going to depend on what happens at 2:30 p.m. So just to be clear, the rate decision and then the press conference are two separate things. The press conference starts at 2:30 p.m., 30 minutes after this decision comes out. And then Jerome Powell, the big guy, is going to be giving his speech. Whatever he says is going to cause a lot of volatility, so make sure you're ready for that just to be safe. All right, so to clarify, expect some volatility upon open and then lots of sideways price action until we get to 2 p.m. when we have the rate decision. Then Jerome Powell's speech is going to cause crazy, wild volatility that's very difficult to predict. The market thinks there's a 95.4% chance we get a 25 basis point cut for tomorrow, and there's only about a 4.6% chance they keep rates the same. So I think most likely we're going to get a small cut. And the market's going to likely see a reaction to that once the decision comes out. But then when Jerome Powell starts speaking, he's going to be addressing a lot of things. Now, when CPI data came out, please know that all items CPI without food and energy was very, very flat. It was very flat, not really doing much. That's core CPI. But for CPI for all items, this is starting to uptrend just a little bit. Now, we're still in the twos. We're not even at the threes yet, so I wouldn't necessarily be way too concerned. But we're going to see how Jerome Powell addresses this, because I think he's going to be asked about this during the Q&A session. So when he starts being asked questions by these reporters, they may be asking about inflation. Are there some signs that inflation is going up? If Jerome Powell has a more neutral tone and he keeps on saying that it's okay, they're on track for the 2% target and this and that, the Fed's very confident things are going to be fine, there's a good chance the market may like that and may try to bounce. But if Jerome Powell starts saying something such as the Fed has to be a little bit more cautious, they're not going to be in a rush to cut rates again until they see this really cool off and things like that, and he has a little bit more of a hawkish tone and he's very, very careful, if anything, that could cause the market to slow down a bit, because that could lead to some uncertainty. So keep that in mind, guys. The market does not like uncertainty. If Jerome Powell incites more uncertainty, that could cause the market to slow as well. Now, for earnings, there's not really much coming out. It's very, very minor, if anything. Tomorrow we have General Mills, Micron, and a couple of others. For Thursday, we have basically FedEx, Nike, and BlackBerry, and a few more. And that's pretty much it. There's nothing too crazy coming out for Thursday. But I would say this, although it's a very, very quiet week for earnings, there are some reasons that could cause a little bit of volatility for those sectors. But that's pretty much it. Now, for the fear and greed index, right now we're at neutral. We're stuck in the middle. We're not too greedy, not too fearful. We're just stuck in between. Momentum is also at greed. That's making up the majority of sentiment, but it's starting to slow down right here. So it's not looking that great because momentum is slowing. Now, could this become extremely greedy again? It's always a possibility. We'll have to see about that. Then the puts and call option ratio is at extreme greed. That's making up the majority of sentiment. There's a lot of greed that's still positive, but this could shift depending on what Jerome Powell says. So if he causes the rug pull, this could start going up and this could become less greedy, becoming a little bit more fearful. We'll see about that. I do want to warn you guys that typically when the fear and greed index is this greedy, and we start to see like the puts and call option ratio this greedy as well, when it's at these lows in terms of the ratio, that does tend to signal a bottom. I'm sorry, a top in the markets. Excuse me, guys. That tends to signal a top, which could lead to a rug pull. That's what that typically signifies. So we'll see about that. You're right. It's a little bit of a warning I have for everyone, especially as the VIX is trying to show some life. That could signify something very big as well, but not a guarantee. It's always just a possibility. We'll see if that ends up being the case. So, what is my view for the markets? What do I think is going to pan out? So let's now talk about what my predictions happen to be. So, if Jerome Powell gives his little speech and let's just say the market makes this big move, we want to see SPY break 608. If he pumps us and we break 608, expect this thing to go up to 610 and potentially all the way up to about 615. We're going to be starting the next leg up for a much bigger pump if Jerome Powell pumps the markets. If the market gets a rug pull after Jerome Powell's speech, SPY could start dumping to a lot lower levels, and that's when we open the doors for some of the gaps below to get filled. Not to mention, a break of support. So I would say that if SPY loses 602, we're looking for 600 and 598, followed by 595 as our targets. I think 595 would be coming at the very least. And then on the daily chart, there are those gaps to fill. So I'm going to be watching some of these. Uh, I'm not too worried about this one that's like all the way down here. It's kind of far. We're not going to worry about that yet. For now, we're just going to be looking at this imbalance down here as the first support. We also have our 20 EMA on the daily, then also this one right here. So we could be looking for, a rug pull if Jerome Powell causes that. Now, the market could go either way, but this is what you should be watching for tomorrow. Expect some volatility when we open tomorrow. So we'll see if we get kind of like a dip, a pop, and some sideways price action. Then expect some chop, at least as the day goes on. And then when the decision comes out, if we get the cut, there might be a little pop that comes only to come back down. And then during Jerome Powell's speech, when the guy starts opening his mouth, he might launch this to new all-time highs, or he might cause a big rug pull. So it could go either way. I personally can't predict what's going to happen because it depends on what Powell says. But I do want to give you guys a warning that we are making lower highs on SPY. And technically speaking, we did close weaker than before. So it is looking a little bit weaker, especially since we are below our 50 EMA right now. So this does look a little bit weaker technically and does favor, us getting some kind of rug pull back down to like 600 or 598. But just know that technicals are not sufficient because it depends on Jerome Powell and the Fed, and that's going to trump things a lot more. What this means is I can't promise anything just based off technicals. It depends on FOMC, but just know technicals do suggest downside. It's a bit more probable. Another reason why I say that is because when you look at ES, right, we have this huge gap. We gapped up like crazy on ES and NQ. There's a big gap to fill now down below. So as we're at this level on ES, okay, going into tomorrow, we might see some consolidation here. And then when the decision comes out, there might be a little pop and a drop. But then when Jerome Powell starts his speech, if we end up losing 6,100 around the 6101 area, we could be dumping all the way down. Okay, it's about the 6080 area or below, back down to the levels we were at a couple of days ago. Back into this range is where this is going to be headed. And this is going to drag SPY down. So that is looking a little bit more favorable as we have this big gap to fill. But we'll see. It depends on what the big guy says. You never know. We have to be like very open-minded as traders. You never know what's going to happen. So don't be too confident. This could also be a trap. So we'll see. Does SPY reclaim 6140 and turn back to bullish? Or do we lose 6100 and turn more bearish? Sorry, not SPY, ES. If ES does that, the odds do favor the downside, but we'll see just to be safe. For Nvidia, it's very simple. We're going to be watching this 130 area. If we can't hold this, we're looking for 128 and 125 as our targets. If Powell gives us the rug pull, if we get a bounce, we're looking for essentially 133.8 or above. To me, technically speaking, it looks like it wants to rebound just a little bit. We could be looking for a test of the very low 130s, but then there is this head and shoulders here. And so far, although buyers are trying to defend the support around 125, if we end up getting rejection and Powell gives us the rug pull, this could still continue and drag us much lower towards 115. So it could go either way with a head and shoulders like structure. We have to wait and see which way we end up going. So give this the time it needs as we end up progressing. I'm going to be very open-minded, unbiased when I say what I have to say. Just know that Jerome Powell could launch us back up towards 136, or he could give us the rug pull. I think we might push into the low 130s in the morning. Then we'll see if we get a rug pull later on. I still see a risk of that looking at this chart with the head and shoulders. So be careful with Nvidia, guys. I just want to give you guys a heads up about that. As far as Bitcoin goes, this might be dipping towards 104,842. Might be a small dip that's coming to Bitcoin before it attempts to bounce again. For now, that's going to be what the trend suggests, a little bit of a dip and a rebound, some sideways price action. But then FOMC could cause us to launch higher or get a rug pull, depending on what the dollar does and what Jerome Powell says. So wait for that very, very carefully, and we'll have to see how things end up going. Tesla, of all things, is very strong. It's on a very, very nice uptrend, but just know that the 480 area is getting a lot tougher. Now, 500 is a very, very psychological level. We haven't really reached it yet. And whether or not we get a bounce depends on Jerome Powell and the Fed. Now, tomorrow it's possible Tesla attempts to retest 480 and consolidates between 480 and the 465 area for the most part. We might see a lot of sideways price action tomorrow with the dip and a lot of like bouncing. But then Jerome Powell, if he launches the market to new highs, this could be going to the 490s all the way up to 500, or he could cause us to dip back down to 460 or below. If we lose that, I'd be looking for essentially 450, which would align with our 20 EMA by tomorrow. So, do we dump 20 points to 450? Do we basically launch at least 20 points to the 490s? Could go either way depending on Powell. I expect some consolidation in the morning, and it all depends on what Jerome Powell causes, at least at that point. Now, I want to call out NQ. This is looking a little bit more bearish, technically speaking, so we have this gap to fill, but it's not a guarantee. Nothing's guaranteed until we see FOMC. Let's look at 22,250. If we lose that, we're looking for the gap fill all the way down to 22,100 or below. If we hold this, we could attempt to rebound for 22,400. We are stuck in the middle, but there is that risk of downside looking at the current trend. So please keep that in mind, and we'll have to see what ends up happening. For the QQQ, we have this resistance to watch for around 538, and we have support around 531.79. We're stuck in the middle, going back and forth and back and forth. I do see a risk of us dipping back down to 531.8, and we'll see if we bounce or not. So I think the QQQ might dip a little bit more. There is a risk of this, at least technically speaking. Might see a small dip and a bounce and some consolidation. And then Jerome Powell's either going to launch this back up to the 540 area, or he's about to cause a rug pull to 525 or below. Could go either way, but just know we do look like we favor a bit of a dip for now. So we'll see what ends up happening, at least as time goes on. For Apple, it looks very bullish, technically speaking. Could be looking for a push for 255. If that breaks, we're looking for 258. And if we get a rug pull, we're looking for a break below 252 to dip to 250. So it could go either way as we're making higher highs and higher lows. It's still looking pretty good. We'll be watching to see how well we hold here. We could be retesting the 252 area before it attempts to bounce again. So we'll see about that. But overall, I think we're doing a fantastic job at holding up. So this is showing a lot of strength. There could be a small dip and a bounce. For now, it's still holding up very well. So there's a good chance it's going to hold up approaching FOMC. But then during Jerome Powell's speech, anything could happen. So that's why you want to be very open-minded just to be safe. For now, I do anticipate it's going to hold up very well approaching Powell's speech, and we'll see what happens afterwards. Does he launch us to new all-time highs, or do we get a rug pull back down below 250? So it could go either way. As far as Netflix goes, we're very, very sideways right now. We already pumped so much for the last couple of days. There was a slight bearish divergence developing right over here, which is what led to this sell-off. So it does look weaker. It favors a drop to about $911 a share. If we lose this, we could be dipping all the way down towards 900 flat. If we break past 930, we turn back up. So it depends on Jerome Powell's speech. It could go either way, of course, but this chart's favoring $911 as the most likely possibility. For MSTR, we are range bound right now, going back and forth and back and forth. We have the support around this 360 area. We have resistance around 440. Now, for now, we got this rejection. We're struggling to hold above our 1520 EMAs. We need to get back above 400. Otherwise, this chart is favoring a double top and a push down towards that 368 area. So just keep that in mind, guys. There's going to be that risk of downside. Celsius or CELH is looking a little bit more bearish. We need to reclaim 30. Otherwise, this is favoring downside back down towards 28. So I think the odds are favoring the downside movement. We'll just have to see what happens from here. So with this distribution pattern, excuse me, guys, this is looking a little bit more bearish, and I think that this is favoring 28 for tomorrow. But then even if we do get a small dip, we'll see if Jerome Powell causes a big bounce for 30 or not. So just keep that in mind. So this might be dipping a little bit more, and then give this the time it needs. For Supermicro, we look a little bit weaker as well. I would love to see this try to reclaim 37 to turn back up. Otherwise, this is favoring a rejection and a move back down towards 31.8. So I think that this might be dipping a little bit more here. It might be making a low rate. We'll have to see if it bounces or not. So here's what's going to happen, okay? We're going to do this. It's very simple. We're going to be dipping like this. We need to bounce near 32. If we make a higher low compared to the low, we could try to bounce like that. But if we fail to do so, this could be dipping all the way back down. If we lose 31.8, we'll be dipping to 30 all over again. So look for a small dip and we'll see if we bounce or not. That's going to depend on FOMC. So keep that in mind. For Palantir, we're looking very flat right now, a little bit weaker, at least on the 4-hour time frame. As we have a head and shoulders, we're also showing some weakness. We're below our 20 EMA, so this is favoring a move down to about the 71s. So we'll see, just to be safe, but 71 points. What is that? 71.68 looks a little bit more probable. So we'll see if that ends up being the case. If that fails, we could be dipping all the way down towards 68. So give that some time. For Rivian, we look a little bit weaker. We could be retesting 14.44. If that fails, we're looking for essentially 14. There's that risk of downside, so give this the time it needs. SoFi is trying to rebound off our 20 EMA. We got a nice breakout. We were talking about this yesterday. I anticipated some downside yesterday, and that's what happened thus far. So now we're attempting to rebound. So the question now remains, will SoFi try to break this high and try to break out like this? That depends on Jerome Powell. Or do we make a lower high like this and then reject and start coming back down? I would say this looks a bit more probable, as we might be rebounding towards this imbalance, maybe coming a little short. If we're coming back down towards our 50 EMA, I find that to be a little bit more probable. For the IWM, we're on a bit of a downtrend. We're going to be retesting the 230 area, and we'll see if we bounce or not. If we don't bounce off that, this could be dumping all the way down towards 228. And if this does hold, we could attempt to rebound for 233. So as of right now, we look a little bit more bearish. We're making lower highs and lower lows. So this is favoring downside. So we'll see what kind of move we make from here. For AMD, we're on a bit of a downtrend right here. We could be dipping back down towards 122. And we'll see what kind of reaction we get. I think 122 is likely going to be where we're heading towards. It looks a little bit weaker to me. There's no sign of a bounce quite yet, so we'll see. But if Jerome Powell causes a bounce and we reclaim 128, I will turn back to bullish, and then we're expecting the 130s after that. So we'll see. But we do look a little bit weaker. I just want to give you guys a heads up about that. ARM is kind of rejecting here. We have this 145 areas resistance and 140.99 is our support. If we lose that, we're looking for a dip back down towards 136.8. For a coin, we have a double top leg structure rejecting here, so this is favoring a move down towards 303, so keep that in mind. For Amazon, we could be retesting 229. If that fails us, I'm looking for essentially 228, so we'll see if that ends up being the case. Meta has a head and shoulders like structure. We need to get back above 625, otherwise we're favoring 612. For Microsoft, we're looking more bullish, a little bit more bullish, unless we get a rug pull here. So look for this test of 456. If we break that, I'm looking for essentially 458. If we can't break 456, this might be returning to 449. It looks like it's going to be shuffling around 456 for a little bit more upside, and we'll see what kind of reaction we get off of that. It does look a bit more bullish, but whether or not we get the upside depends on what Jerome Powell ends up saying. So please keep that in mind. With that being said, we also have Google, which looks a little bit weaker. We have a bearish divergence. We could be looking for 193.6 down. We'll see what kind of reaction we get from here. So this is looking a little bit more bearish. We might be coming back down to our 20 EMA, so keep that in mind. There's some weakness building. GameStop's looking more bullish. It has the potential to push all the way up towards this resistance around 31.85. Not bad whatsoever. AMC might be attempting to break past 4.27. If that breaks, we're looking for 4.45. There is some potential in this chart. For DJT, it might be revisiting 36.98, and we'll see what happens with Jerome Powell's speech. It might be a small dip approaching FOMC, and we'll see what happens after that. I want to call out that the VIX is starting to break out right here. We have a nice inverse head and shoulder setup. If we break 16 point or 15.97, we're going to be expecting this to pump towards the 18s again. If you break the 18s, we have a big gap to fill up here. So the VIX is showing a lot of life, a lot of strength. We'll see if this continues, especially as the market is slowing. That's going to depend on Jerome Powell's speech. The 10-year is going to depend on what happens with interest rates. So we're waiting to see what the reaction is. And the dollar index is just very flat right here. If we lose 106.87, we're looking for 106.68. If we bounce off this, we could remain more bullish. Now, just know this, the dollar does have a nice double bottom forming a big George W, which typically signifies more upside could be coming. That could once again make it seem like the market has upside potential, or I'm sorry, downside potential is if the dollar has more of the upside potential. So it's kind of like inverse correlated with the markets. So if this does break out higher, that could be bearish for the markets. So we'll see if that ends up being the case or not. With that being said, guys, I want to thank you all so much for listening. Just know that right now the market is looking a little bit weaker. But once again, I can't promise anything until we see what Jerome Powell says. Whatever the guy ends up saying is going to cause a much bigger move. Despite the weakness that is developing on these charts, we will have to just wait and see. So we'll see. Does Jerome Powell give us the big rug pull, or does the market hold up? That will be very, very dependent on his words. Until then, I thank you all so much for listening and wish you guys all the best. Please have a good rest of your day. I'll be back tomorrow before market open to give you guys another update. Thank you for listening. Have a good night and peace out.